going back, I don't know what the percentages were, but they started with percentages from our elementary schools at the time. We were talking, and I was told it was declining because as we were helping students with their needs, they didn't necessarily need the service, but at the time it was 18% in elementary school, in our schools, 21% in the middle schools, and 25% in the high school. So, you know, and at that particular time, we had 2,000 students in the high school, and 500 of those were considered special needs, which I feel was outrageous. Now, I don't know if that is if the percentages are the same or
our percentages
or
are.
that.
So to qualify for a disability under IDA, you have to have there has to be a documentation. You have to require specially designed instruction. There's a process.
Yep.
And then in terms of how they're serviced, and I can tell you one thing, the conversation we've had as an administrative team, we have a lot of families moving in to Coventry, which is a double-edged sword, because if you have a good, if you're servicing students well, people may come in for that. I had a family call me just 2 days ago, and was it 2 days ago, and you know, inquiring about moving in, and they have somebody that lives in town. But it's a double-edged sword, because sometimes students with disabilities, you could spend $100,000, but fair doesn't always mean equal.
No.
And that's where we have to be careful. That's why I'm cautious about these conversations.
In other words, and again, whereas I felt is that, and I think at the time, even the administration and people in education agreed
Sure.
that the identification process had been flawed, and I'm sure it's been addressed. To what level, I don't know, but I mean,
Sometimes it's
you know, but it makes a big
disproportionality,
difference in our budget when you're educating students at $45,000 to $90,000 as opposed to $10,000 to $12,000.
So here's my big piece is that you see headlines in some communities and it's special ed. My feeling is because someone's born with a disability, they shouldn't be viewed as a problem, right?
Yep.
So that's why I'm cautious about this kind of conversation.
Yep.
Publicly, only because that, you know, if you have a child with a disability, and to think that people view that as a problem, because like I said, we have students that cost us well over $100,000. It's our job to be fiscally prudent, to make sure that we're doing the right thing for children, that they're educated, and if there is an over-identification, the federal government looks at that, and then we're under scrutinization. We have to put corrective action in plan. But what I don't want to happen here in Coventry is special ed to get this negative connotation. If people are concerned that we're not servicing them properly and question the budget, you have every right to do that, but let's not make
No. Where I'm really going with it is just to show that, I mean, when we have 8% in labor, it comes from particular programs. And when we've got a program, like I said, that, you know, that a student alone can cost us over $100,000 on one student.
Right.
You know, it's impossible to get that type of taxation from one family or even many families. So, which puts us in a state right now which we'll never be out of. It's called permanent fiscal crisis. We are in a state of permanent fiscal crisis. And the only way out of it, and where I'm going with this, is that we have people who look for grants, etc. In education, we're doing it from the state, and the state takes away from us. But what do other school districts in other parts of the country do for are there other ways to bring in additional revenue to address these particular needs as opposed to just on the backs? That's what I would implore the schools to try to look for those other funding sources.
I think we have to just employ best practices and look at, I think when you do the when you do the right thing for kids, I think it is cost effective.
Yep.
And I think we have, you know, so one of the things that we talked about, Mr. Waters and myself talked about, because my feeling is, and I say this all the time, if we don't tell our story, other people are. You know, and sometimes the stories I hear, again, being brand new to this community, you know, I don't like the stories that are being told. You know, people have facts, but they interpret them. So we have to get out in front. One of the things we talked about was doing a presentation as a community, not just a school, not just the municipal side, but what you get for your tax dollars. I think Mr. McGee and I, when we met, I think I talked a little bit about that to you. And I think people have a right, you know, the right to know what do you get for your money. You know, that's part of the reason of supporting the chief, you know, and what's going on. And you know, working with DHS and all the different departments, working with Jay and Recreation, trying to look and see so that we can be telling our story. Because I'm concerned about if we don't, what people are gonna think, and so, I hear what you're saying, but I think with special ed, it's like anything else, we have to make sure that our systems are effective, and that we're maximizing the resources that we have. Let's face it, our resources are people, right? I don't begrudge anybody, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a laborer, to make the most they can, but I think what people have a right to require from us is, what are you doing, what are we getting for our money? That's the part. We have data coming, you know where, and we have lots of data, so what do we do with it?
Whereas, and that's the
So
thing,
we're trying to
conversely,
focus.
and that's what your job is.
Right.
Our job is to determine how we can bring it to the people who are gonna have to pay for it, and that's the.
Well, and that's part of my job too, though. I can't rely on, my job is to be out in front and being out there and taking on what the questions people have, not just in this forum, but out there.
You know.
Because you know, I look around the room,
Yeah.
and there's concerns about televising and all that, I hear that, but when I look around the room, most of the people here, I shouldn't say, but many of the people here work for the community. So to me, it's gotta get outside, you know, and have as many conversations as I can with Mr. Jackson, right? We don't always agree.
That's right.
We're gonna continue to have conversations.
I'm afraid that if we televise everything, we'll never see Mr. Jackson again. He's gonna stay
No,
home
but
in
my
his living
point
room and watch
my
everything
point is,
from
you
there.
want to take it on, but I think
Cold
at the end of the
day in
day,
hell.
you know, the last thing I'll say is, one of the things we have to do is I think, planning for the future as a community. And the schools are a big part of
Well,
it.
that's right, and that's where I'm talking about alternative and additional revenue sources to try to help pay for these things.
But I don't think we're gonna get money for that for special ed. I think there are grants out there.
No, not necessarily for special ed. Again, I'm looking at it because that is such a big piece. And the problem that I've always had, well, like I said, I felt as though, and I know other people did too, that the identification process was really the problem at one point in
Yeah,
time.
and it probably was. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is, I think we ought to look at getting competitive grant writers. You know, it's not, we don't become competitive grant writers. There are people that do that for a living.
Right.
And most schools, I think you were alluding to the fact, we take entitlement money that's out there for us. We just have to account for how we're gonna spend it.
Right.
So that's what schools do. People get the Gates money, they get the money from, you know, other large Wallace foundations.
And I think our community's been pretty good at doing that. I think that our schools have been good, but I think that we have to be very diligent to continue doing that, because, again, the expense of doing this is not keeping up with in essence, that we have, or is, I should say, the private sector is not keeping up with that.
I think we need
And
to think
it's
about
a
doing
big-
business
it's a big
differently as
imbalance.
a community. I think that's what I hate.
And again, and that's not where you're coming from. You're getting the numbers that are being,
No,
that
that's
the
okay.
community comes at you,
Dialogue's good.
so.
Any other questions, before we,
We have a meeting on the
divide it?
28th.
Yes, we do. Mr. Levis, Mr. Draco, thank you
Well,
for coming out tonight, answering our questions.